So, from the title, from the little intro I just did, uh, this is about not so much about why Hollywood writers suck, but it's more or less a response to that rhetoric, especially during the writer strikes, not just the last one, but also the one before that. Basically, you would hear people say, why should writers get paid a fair wage? Because everything they put out sucks. And you also hear that a lot amongst just general discussions of people saying Hollywood writers suck, the writers write in Hollywood sucks. So the point of this video is to provide a good insight. And it's not so much like a direct response, but really just providing a lot of context um, in sort of uh, I don't even want to say a rebuttal, just providing context as to how that type of rhetoric is very short sighted and to explain to those people what exactly is going on with the larger machine that is like the Hollywood industry type thing. So I wanted to provide that sort of intro and this explanation so everybody can understand like what the main point of this is. So this is what most people think that the process is when creating a movie, and particularly from like a writer standpoint. This is how they see it. You have the writer, right? And they have an idea, and they write a script, right? They send that script to a bunch of other people, right? Let's say it's got that. Let's say these are all producers, okay? This is not skill, by the way. They all read it. One of them likes it. And then they give the writer a bunch of money for the script. And then the writer then makes the movie, right? Let's say that's just the movie, the screen. Sometimes maybe the writer will hire or bring on a director who loves the script a ton, right? And makes the movie per the script. That's how most people think it is. Even this is a little bit like, it's not complicated, but there's some moving parts here. This happens less than 5% of the time. In fact, if you think this is how it happens when making a movie, especially from a writing standpoint, I wouldn't say you're delusional, but you're probably relatively new and you don't really have experience as to what you're getting yourself into. The other thing too is about this little guy, the script. It comes from the brain of the writer, right? That's normally what we think. And that is very correct in a lot of sense. But this very rarely happens. Very rarely happens. And one of the reasons why is because this person has the least power and influence. Okay? Forgot a C there. That's why. So I'm going to show you how it typically works. And again, this is a very simplified version that I'm about to show you because even in that, there's so many moving parts, there's so many complicated things that happen, so many variables, that even what I'm going to put on the whiteboard, I'll probably have to erase one or two times to like fit everything in. But even that is not as complicated as it actually is. So let's go ahead and do that. All right. Now, I want to explain like there's different types and levels of writers, right? So you have WGA and non-WGA, right? These people over here have a lot more creative freedom, and these are more restricted. And again, that's like a simplified version. I'm going to write bigger words, don't worry. But WGA, they're a little bit more restricted because they have to follow under like union rules and stuff. So although they can get like a bigger payday, clearly, and get more opportunities because they've been successfully been able to get the WGA, they are limited to what they can do and how they can move because it is more career orientated. People that haven't made the WGA or don't plan on being in it, they do have more creative freedom. They have a little bit more leeway to pick and choose. They don't have to like skip over assignments because they don't pay that much or they're free work or anything. The WGA still does a lot of free work, even though they're not supposed to, but that's just the way the system works right now. But they also, it's like, because they're in the WGA, they're following a little bit more of a system, and they have to because once you get in the WGA, you want to build your career and get to a point where you're, successful and making a lot of money. That's kind of the point. But somebody in the WGA doesn't mean that they don't have a lot of creativity, and vice versa. Doesn't mean that somebody that's not WGA doesn't want to get into the system and work that system. It's just there's two different types of writers, okay? So the thing is, this making a movie applies to both, but we're probably going to be focusing more on WGA, what they go through, because somebody that's non-WGA, they're probably working a lot more in like what I call pure independent filmmaking, where production companies that are very independent and small tend to be involved, and the way they go about making the movie is a little bit more laxed, so to speak. Okay, so you have the studio. Let's just put like a big star there, and they have an idea, or they're trying to figure out an idea of a movie that they want to make so that they can make money, right? That's what they want to do. So they take that idea and spread it among personnel, usually. This can be key people that are close to the studio. Executive producers, creative directors, actors, other directors, sometimes other writers, but very rare. If we're talking about other writer, it's more like an Aaron Sorkin type of person who's really up there, but usually directors, executives, producers, a very, very, very big actor, A-list actor. Now, once they kind of bounce back and forth, they settle on an idea that they believe will make them money, right? That's the big thing. Now, that doesn't mean they're not being creative or anything, but they're looking at things that they generally feel is going to be like widely appealing, okay? And when you're trying to make a movie like that, it's about bringing in audience, not excluding. So artistic and creative licensing is going to be a little bit restrictive. Once they have an idea, then they look for writers. Now, if you notice, who is at the bottom here? The writers. They are not hiring you to come up with stuff. They already came up with it. They just need you, one of you, sometimes all three of you, to just write a fucking script so they can make their movie. Did I spit there? Sorry. That is the reason why you may think Hollywood writers suck. But they don't suck. They're just doing what these people are paying them to do, which is write their script. They did not come up with anything. They were just hired. Now you may say, why don't the writers, if they really care about their craft, why don't they, say something? Because they need money to pay bills. and there's not a lot of jobs for writers. So when you get a job, you try to like make it happen. Uh, and that doesn't mean that all writers are pushovers and stuff like that. There are plenty of writers who will turn down a job, quit a job, say, you know what, fuck this, I'm not doing this, and leave. I've done it. I know several other writers who have done it and have given up a paycheck over it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you you do need to take opportunities that where a studio is willing to pay you up front for a script. Now, a lot of times it doesn't even really happen. They'll ask each of these writers to write a spec or to write a pitch, and then they'll bring them on based on their idea to write the script. So that happens too. But that, when they write a spec or when they come up with a pitch, they don't necessarily get paid for that either. A lot of times they don't. So that takes time and energy and effort. Now, this is a simplified version because let's see, I'm going to have to erase this, right? Soak it in. So you go through all of that and you're writing a script as a writer. And mind you, you're very career orientated right now. You've done what you've done to get into the WGA or to get into this position. So now it's really about networking and trying to make people happy. Okay, so you're the writer, you got hired, and let's just say they're going to pay you $100,000, right? They're paying you $100K to write this script, and all they want is just a script. They're not looking for you to do really anything more than that. So for you, you're like, this is easy money. It's not my idea. It's not anything. The movie may not even get made, but you just want to get paid and you want to get the script out and you want to build a good relationship. So you write the script and you send it to the studio. Cool. They like it. Maybe they have some notes, right? You're going to change those notes for them because they're paying you $100,000. Hell, even if they're paying you $50,000, $50,000 is nice to have for a couple months of work, maybe even more than that. But you want to pay your bills, right? So you do that, and this whole time you're just doing your job as a writer, which is to get from point A to B to C. Okay? Now they send it to, let's put this person big. This could be, let's say, times 3. A director, a producer, an actor that are A-list or that are high up there. You're out of the equation at this point, but you wrote the script, so you get the credit. These people, whoever they are, the A-listers, they decide to make some changes. And they bring on another writer that doesn't get credit. They make some changes per their ideas, right? Then they go into production. What are we going to do? Right there. They go into production. After that, they realize, damn, some things don't work. We wanted to shoot in Los Angeles, but it's on fire right now because, LA catches on fire, the surrounding area every now and then. So let's go to New Mexico or whatever. Now we have to do some more rewrites because the scenes that we wanted to shoot, we can't shoot them here anymore. We have to shoot them somewhere else. We have to come up with something else. So they do some more rewrites and they're bringing another writer who doesn't get credit, but they get paid, whatever. And then eventually the movie's done. And at the end of the day, maybe about 30% of what you wrote stayed in the script. It's a Frankenstein of a production. Now, sometimes that still ends up working well for you. It makes a lot of money and everybody likes it. Or it makes a lot of money, but everybody says it sucks. Or it sucks and it doesn't make any money. But because your name is the main credit, everybody thinks you suck. That is the general process of a writer's experience and influence when it comes to making a movie. And remember, This wasn't even your idea. You just got hired to write it. Now, here's the thing you're going to say. Well, you know, if you're a writer and you're so creative, why would you take that job? Blah, 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 blah. Or, you should still be able to write like a good thing. Yes, this could have been done really well. Or, you know what, it could have been done very bad because it's all coming from the ideas of the studio and all their ideas are bad or not really well thought out. Whatever, okay? I'll explain it to you in another creative context, right? Now, one thing I want to emphasize, there are writers who aren't good at writing. Most of us are average. And some of us are able to do a home run every now and then because writing is really hard. There's very, very few people that are just exceptional at the craft of writing all the time. It's not like, it's not as easy as people make it sound. And you have to remember, even like the best writers in the industry, they go through so many drafts of what you would consider subpar writing before they get to like the really great draft that they have. A lot of great writing is just doing the same thing over and over again until you get to the best version. So now this is the thing I'm going to say. All writers have multiple scripts that are original. And I'm going to put some stars because these are great. That are original, that are unique, that come from their brain, that if made into the movie the right way, would be awesome, would be original, wouldn't suck. Even if you didn't like it, you'd be like, well, that was really creative, at the very least. The thing is, unless you're like an A-list writer, nobody is really going to give you the time of day. They'll read it and they'll may tell you, I really like these, but I want you to write something for me instead, which has happened to me. I had written something, a producer said, write something for me, and he paid me $10,000 to do it for 1 month of work. So I did. And I wrote it exactly the way he wanted me to write it in terms of like the plot points, the characters, and all of that, because he doesn't write. He's not a writer. He needs somebody to hire a writer to write for him, which is what most producers would try to do. And nobody liked it. So they thought that I sucked. And sure, I did suck, but that's just what it is. Right? Now, this is the other aspect that I'm going to go for. Sticking with that example, think of it like this. You have somebody who is an architect, right? Let's say that. And they're very creative with their art. They went to school for it. They learned all these things. And they've done some of their own architectural work. Maybe not for sale, maybe to try to get interest of people to show their skills. So let's say they did a building that's like a circle. Very creative. A building that's a circle. That's interesting. Then let's say they did like a design like that for a house, right? That's awesome. Cool. It's very different. Then let's say they did a house that was designed like this, right? You're like, oh wow, they're very unique. So much like a studio, they may see a writer that has a lot of creativity. And the studio up here, I'll put them way up here. They're like, wow, their work is great. I'm going to hire this architect to build me a facility, a house, or whatever that I can sell and make a lot of money off of. So when they come, they don't say, hey, I want you to build me one of these. No, they say, I want you to build me something that I can sell. So they end up hiring this architect to build a building, a commercial building, that is your standard, basic, predictable building. They can do it, but it's nowhere near their realm of creativity. And then all the people who see that building, see how boring and lame it is, are all going to say the same thing. This guy sucks. He sucks. How could they pay him so much money to build such a boring, lame building? But most people don't see this ever because these will never get shown, these will never get seen. This guy is a screenwriter. Okay? This is how it works. We don't want it to work this way, but this is unfortunately how it works. Okay? Now, for every argument you have, there's an answer to it or rebuttal to it. I can't sit here for an hour and a half and go through it, but, the thing is, I'm going to kind of reiterate one of the earlier points. The way it works is Hollywood comes up with the idea, and when they decide to put money on it, they hire a writer or writers, especially if it's TV, to write this thing the way that they want it. Plain and simple. You're being hired to do a job. They are not coming up with anything. Now, you may say, well, there's shows and there's movies out there that are super creative, that are the studios let them run the ideas. Yes, and those tend to work, but that's not how most of it works. This is easily 60 to 80% of how it works. Depending on the year, a couple of years, it may fluctuate, but 60 to 80% of the time, this is how it works. And even if you have a writer who comes up with an idea, right? Say like an A+ idea, and a studio loves it, there is a 80 to 90% chance, they are going to change things. It's almost inevitable. They're always going to give notes. They're going to send it to some script coverage reader who's 20 years old that doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about to tell this person to change stuff. This is why also a lot of stuff dies. There's a lot of writers that at a certain point, they feel like undignified and they say they walk away from the project. But then what ends up happening is the studio ends up just bringing in another writer or creator or any of that. It's a very messy, complicated process. And the thing is, most of the writers in Hollywood can write a story. It's like most architects, most painters can paint just like they can paint. They can do the job well. But when you're being hired to do something, you have to do it the way they tell you to do it or the way they want you to do it. And it's very, very hard, almost damn near impossible, to get something made that goes basically the way that I pointed it out, or the way that most people assume that it goes from the start, right? You have a writer, idea that they wrote, studio loves it, studio puts money into it, studio basically signs off on everything, and then it's made, right? And everybody watches it and generally loves it. This almost never happens. It happens from time to time, but a lot of times this person has to have a lot of like A+ influence. They have to have a lot of pull, a lot of connections, a lot of really good relationships. Or this thing has to be hitting right place, right, and right time. Right place and right time. Like, I think a good example of this, True Detective. First season. Season 1. Nick Pizzolatto wrote the scripts. HBO fucking loved it. They put money into it. Also, Matt McConaughey and Woody Harrelson loved it. A-list stars, essentially. And so they basically loved everything. They didn't really change anything. And that's it. And Nick Pizzolatto wasn't like an A-list person, but it's just right place and right time. That's really what it came down to. And I think even a more recent one, if you look at also Baby Reindeer, essentially the writer, I can't remember his name, I'm sorry, he had a lot of creative control because he had actually already gone on a theater show of this series before it became a streaming series. And it garnered a lot of success. So it already had a bit of a proof of concept thing to it. It was already successful and had already gotten its sort of its validation that it would be a hit. So it made sense not to change anything. They probably changed stuff purely for production aspect and added, obviously they added some things in there. But the reality is this wasn't a thing to where he wrote a script and it was just like so widely loved that they just let him run. No, he had already done a theater show, like, I don't know how to fucking do a theater here. Like curtains. He had already done like a theater show and had wild success with it. So again, he had like A+ pool at that point. He had already got what he wanted. And the TV show was just a bonus. When people say Hollywood writers suck, I would really like for them to be able to look and Google a lot of their credentials, because a lot of times you'll see that it's sort of like up and down with a lot of them. They'll have a movie that sucks that they wrote, and then they'll have a movie that's like, wow, that's actually a really great movie. The writer for Arrival is one. I can't remember exactly what the previous movie he made, but basically, Eric wrote a movie for a studio that many people would look and say sucked. And they would probably consider saying that he sucks as a writer. Hollywood writers suck because of this movie. But he also wrote Arrival, which was, in my opinion, like a masterpiece. Not just the film itself, but the actual script. The script is one of the best scripts I've ever read. So, does he suck? No, because a sucky writer can't write something like this. He really can't. And to get even to this point in his career, had to do a lot of things right. And a lot of things right had to happen in his favor. And he had to be good enough at each of those pit stops to get to this point to write a movie that many people didn't like or didn't do well for a studio. Okay? Now, the thing is, it is very possible for a writer to write a sucky script, have it made into a movie, and it sucks, right? We know that. But that's sort of the thing, too, that people have to realize is, there's a saying in Hollywood that it's a miracle that any movie gets made, and it's even a bigger miracle that it's good. Because when it comes to making a movie, like, you have the script, right? Whether or not it's good or not, having a good script only helps. But there are many good scripts that get made into bad movies. So it's not the writer's fault a lot of times. Because as I mentioned before, when you are raising money, right? Unless you're crowdfunding, but a lot of times you have what's like a primary investor, right? That primary investor, let's say they're going to put up like 20, 30% or whatever. 1 second. They're going to have some demands. They're going to have some wants. It's not uncommon for like a primary investor and executive producer who's coming in and bringing in money to say, we can give you this money if these particular people are on the project. Could be actors, directors, other producers. If you bring these people, we will get this money. Once you bring in these people, that is going to change this. It always is. Now, when you start going into production, you're going to have, let me see if I can draw this. This is awful. That's supposed to be a gear. I'm not a drawer, okay? But like a little gear, a machine gear. All of the gears in the machine have to work together. So if something doesn't fit right, it has to be changed so that it can fit right, which often means it's going to affect the story. And this could be many things. Maybe this person right here wants to make a change. They want to shoot something somewhere else because they actually want to bring in this other person to do stuff. I think you're kind of getting the point here. And because they're going to bring in this person, this needs to change in order to accommodate them. And remember, all this money's coming in. Even if it's small money, it's still a lot of money. Then also, as you're actually shooting the film, right? Some stuff may happen. Maybe, even if you have everything intact here, let's say a lot of it's intact, you realize some scenes just don't work. Or now that you see it on, on actual film or on the little hub where they watch the screen and the takes and all that. I can't remember it. I'm sorry. Something's not working. So now we have to figure out and change things in the script. And sometimes that works for the better. Or sometimes, let's say somebody involved is causing issues. So now we have to change this so that we can fix this. That is a very simplified version of the movie making process. This thing, basically, for better or worse, it either gets an upgrade. It's like an old car that gets upgraded into like brand new parts, brand new coat through this process. If you have a lot of smart people that understand if this person has something very special, but most of the time you don't. Because a lot of times producers think they are writers and know more about writing because they read Save the Cat or something like that. But they don't. And a lot of people in Hollywood are successful by proxy. So you may have, like, I'm kind of going on a tangent here, a producer who liked the script. That script went on to make a lot of money. So by now, this person thinks they know what good writing is. But it was just really luck. It's like if I went to the slot machine, pulled the slot machine and won $1 million. I can't be like, well, I know how to gamble now. I don't. I just got lucky, because I played the game enough to get lucky. So once you have somebody in that space, they tend to tell a lot of writers what to do and what not to do when they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Really. This is not my personal sentiment. Get in any circle with a bunch of writers, they'll all have the same sentiment. Okay? Now, as I said, this is just the general process of a very simplified version of the script. And unless you have like a really good script and a lot of people that understand what they have, to get it to be 80 to 90% maintaining its quality is very, very difficult. And, what I was going to say is that this script either becomes like an old car that gets a brand new paint job and leather seats and a whole upgrade, or it becomes a car that everybody smashes with a bat. That's really what's the only two outcomes that happen when it comes to making a movie. Or if you just have like a relatively nice car and it just stays relatively nice, nobody really does anything with it. They don't leave it alone. It drives fine. Just fucking let it drive. So that's essentially the process. Now, to kind of sub things up, you may think, well, why don't writers just double down? If they have these amazing scripts, why don't they just like not do any work and all of that? Which is interesting to say if you say that, because that's kind of the point of the strike, is for writers to get either more pay or more influence in the creative decision making of the film process. But one thing I do want to say though as well is my olive branch here is there are plenty of examples of writers or directors, but let's focus on writers, kind of having just full power, full control over their projects and failing miserably, and the projects end up sucking. That happens too. I'm not going to deny that. But to kind of have this blanket statement that like Hollywood writers suck, and I'm saying this as somebody who, if this is the industry, I'm like, and this is the center where a lot of writers are at. Some writers are here. This is the centerpiece of the industry to show how I'm like right there. Okay. So I could have easily been somebody that's like, oh no, Hollywood writers suck and blah, blah, blah. I'm like right there. Okay. But they don't. I know I've met and talked to and met a lot of writers, and yeah, there are writers who are like not that great that can improve on their skills a little bit more, that are pretty not that creative. But most of the writers are pretty serious about what they're doing, especially the ones that are really in that bubble. But the other thing that you also have to realize is you have a writer, and this is going back to actually what I was saying before. So you have the WGA writer and the non-WGA, right? And this is going to be another simplified version because this is not necessarily true for this person, but it's more common. WGA writer has an agent, a manager, and a lawyer. Usually they have at least two of those three. Almost have to have an agent, usually with a big agency. And a non-WGA writer may have an agent, or manager, or nothing at all. And they're completely solo. I've been relatively solo for most of it. I've had to be my own manager, and at times I've hired lawyers before to help with certain contracts that I've had, the far and few in between that I've had. But you have to also look at this. These individuals all take a percentage, and they all need to get paid. And this person, at this point, now they have to be career focused. They have to take the job for the the Netflix series that pays them X amount of dollars, so that they can pay them, they can get paid, and they can hopefully move up in the ladder and get more influence and get to a point where they can do their own projects and have more freedom. But they can't skip over that unless they write something, again, right place, right time, that captures the attention of somebody that has a lot of influences and protects them. This is pretty much what they have to do. Non-WGA people, they do have more freedom. They can turn down money because usually they have other means. Like I was freelancing in other aspects of writing, like content for websites, copywriting. I was doing a lot of proofreading and stuff like that. So I was able to make, and also I had a day job. And even now, I work as a pizza chef and I make a lot more money than I ever did as a freelance writer. So for me, I can really just do one or two jobs a year that pay really well, and then That's it. Like I'm not dependent on that. And there's also a lot of WGA writers that do have a 9 to 5 still because they can't get jobs, because they can't pick and choose, really. They have to kind of take what they can, and they're also in competition with other WGA writers. So it's a very complicated thing here. Now, the thing is, because of this ecosystem, you're not really, as a WGA writer, here to create as much as you are to be a utility. Okay? You're a utility. You're the studios and networks and production companies use you as a utility to accomplish a task that they want. Now, obviously, a lot of companies and studios, they ask for projects to be sent to them, but a lot of times those projects, they're not looking to just get something and then get behind it 100% in terms of like, oh, this is a perfect 90-minute movie or 60-minute pilot, just do it and whatever. That happens, rare from time to time, but a lot of times they want to, once they get it, like I said in that previous board, they bring in producers, actors, other creative people that all have their wants and needs, and everything changes at that point. So when it comes to the fact that if something is getting made, it was written good enough to where people wanted to see it made in the studio system or in the Hollywood system. Now, if it ends up being bad because of all the rewrites, all the changes, the production, you can't really pin that on the writer. So clearly at some point it was actually something good. It didn't suck at some point. Now again, are there scripts that get made that suck? Yes, because people have connections. But it doesn't happen as often as you think. It really doesn't. And you may think like, oh, everybody that's non-WGA, it's because they're really good. No, these are all kind of the same. They're kind of equal. Some of these people that don't get into WGA, it's because they didn't get right place, right time. They didn't get as lucky as this person. Sometimes they don't work as hard as this person, or sometimes they're not as determined, and I don't say that in a bad way. They're not as they're not really goal orientated towards this. For me personally, I would like to get into this, but it's not like I don't wake up every day like, how do I get into the WGA? I don't do that. I just kind of focus on my own stuff and hoping that at some point something hits well and the right things happen at the right time, and I end up being able to get into that. Like I had a friend that he was kind of like in that same space, like not really looking. He wanted to be in the WGA, but what ended up happening is he wrote a script that was his script. It right place, right time, and he qualified and got into the WGA because it got optioned and picked up and all of that. So, that's how he got it. And it wasn't necessarily, I wouldn't say it was planned, but it was like, he was really just focused on doing his own thing at that point. And obviously he did want to get in the WGA, but all the blah, 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 blah. But you get the point. So the thing is that, I think the other thing is too, is a lot of people, ironically, who are very aggressively judging towards like Hollywood writers and stuff are people who don't write, who have no idea, who are very quick to give feedback and criticism when they have zero idea of what they're talking about. Oftentimes they don't even have the credentials that the person they're criticizing has. I remember somebody in a workshop was reading something and another writer in it, and this was another writer, but it was like they were barely getting into writing. They gave some sort of criticism and feedback, and they didn't even realize the person reading in the workshop had like won a competition, like a pretty like solid competition, and had sold another script. And it wasn't like, it was more or less like sort of the criticism was like, you don't really, you need to work more on your writing. And it's like, slow your roll there. And it seems like the people that tend to do a lot of that type of criticism don't really have the credentials to back it up. And a lot of people think because they read a lot that translates into knowing what good writing is. It doesn't. It really doesn't. It's like just because you eat out a lot at restaurants doesn't mean you know how to cook the food. It's the same thing. You read a lot, but it's writing it is a whole different animal and beast. So that's the other thing too. And I think anybody who does have some semblance of what this entails, this whole like what it takes to just write something and send it out, and what the general process and outcome is, isn't going to necessarily say Hollywood writers suck, or say like Hollywood writers don't deserve to get paid, because actually I think this only justifies how much they get paid because of what they're having to sacrifice and give up, and what they end up having to deal with on the long term when they write something that is generally good. And I'm not saying like a masterpiece, but it's good, it's above average, and the system ends up tearing it apart and turning it into something crappy, and they have to bear the brunt criticism of that. So I think they should get paid even more because they are going to be the ones criticized for it. I mean, that I can't really explain it any more clear than that. And really, at the end of the day, one more thing. I'm going to show you another thing too. Just because I know of a few writers that work in television or streaming. So they get hired to write a show that the streaming service or the studio wants. Now, obviously, they hire a showrunner, they hire directors, and they hire writers, but it's all dictated by the studio heads, the executives. So what happens is they give an assignment to the writers, right? The writers discuss it. And then one of the writers writes a script. And then they send it to the studio or the streaming service. And I'm telling you, this is exactly what has happened multiple times. Then the studio, I'm going to draw a little robot here, asks the algorithm, does this check out? And if the algorithm says no, they rewrite it to fit the algorithm against the will of the writers. So that's what happens a lot of times. So they could have written a really good script, but then once the studio gets it and asks the almighty overlord robots, the algorithm, if it fits in line with what they're trying to do through the streaming, through online, through social media, and the algorithm says no, they have it changed to fit the algorithm. So that happens a lot. And which is why a lot of writers oftentimes don't want their names on stuff. And while you'll meet writers that have worked on shows that you can't find their credits for those shows because they don't want their name, because this is happening. So it's just a different world, and it's kind of always been like that, but it's just gotten worse and worse. And that's just what it is. Like there's nothing to really complain about. I'm just explaining it and why many people make that push that rhetoric, and they don't really know what they're talking about. So if you genuinely believe and want to double down on the whole like Hollywood writers suck, then write a script and get it sold for a couple million, or get it made into a movie that makes $150 million at the box office off of like a $50 million budget. Go and do that, because if we all suck, then you must be amazing. And it's probably going to be really easy for you to just write a script and just have everybody love it so much that they just give you full creative control. So go do that. I encourage you to do that, and really prove us wrong. So